What if the key to achieving everything you want in life wasn't about working harder, but about truly understanding yourself? What if the reason you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated isn't because you're not capable, but because you're playing the wrong game for you? In today's episode, we're diving into mental performance, identity-based success, and unlocking your highest potential with someone who lives and breathes high performance. My guest today is Gary Chupik, an elite mental performance coach, leadership strategist, and the founder of Elite Mindset. Gary helps high performers, athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs train their minds like pros so they can show up stronger, think faster, and succeed at the highest level. But here's what makes Gary different. Just like me, he's not about cookie cutter strategies. Instead, he helps people identify their unique blueprint for success, how they're wired, what holds them back, and what needs to shift so they can move forward from stuck to unstoppable. We talked about all sorts of things, from finding your highest and best use in life to the power of inspired action and hesitation versus confidence, and so much more. This is a must-listen episode for anyone who's tired of second-guessing themselves and who wants to step into a more powerful, aligned version of who they are. Let's dive in. Enjoy this conversation with Gary. Thanks for coming on. It's a real pleasure to connect with you all the way over to Seattle, where you are in the US. And I don't often get people from the US reaching out, so it's nice when they do. So thank you. And it's also a pleasure because, looking and reading about you, like, we haven't met in person, we don't know each other personally, but we have similar visions for the world. Basically, a very generalized statement, but I think we want people to be better and to make better decisions for themselves, and to, what was the word that you said in your...
Unlock potential.
Yeah, possibly. That was, one of them was unlock potential. Oh, right there, here it is. I've got your website up over here. It says to unlock and unleash people, teams, and businesses to find their calling and purpose and organize their lives around their highest and best use in life. I love that.
Yeah.
So straight into it. How do people find their best use in life? How do you support people to find that?
Yeah. Well, as a mental performance coach, I always say that, mental performance, when it's identity based, it's powerful. Because if I try and cookie cutter what works with one person and put it on another person, you just kind of go, some people say, oh, that's just not me. It's kind of like saying, some people have a visceral reaction to the word habits. But if habits doesn't sort of turn your crank, then I like to use the word rhythms. Like, what rhythms can you implement in your life that put you in the best position to succeed? And so finding your purpose and your calling, these are exercises that I do with people. And so I do something called a self-scouting report, since it's the sports theme. And so it's like, if we could just sort of take a look at you and figure out from an identity-based performance standpoint, if we find something that's you, and that's not cookie cutter, you're more likely to do it because it's just simply an expression of your identity. So you don't have to try that hard. And so I think there's a lot of just surrender that needs to go on. And I don't know if you can do that without first being aware of who you are and how you've been wired. For example, I was speaking in Nashville, Tennessee here last week, and we were talking about just sort of discovering yourself. And, I was equating, being a hammer, and how each of us is a tool. And if we're used in the intended way that we've been created, whatever way that is, then we get to be so useful in that lane with that tool. And so, for example, you can be a hammer, but did you know that there are 12 different kinds of hammers? And so when you can not only identify the tool that you are, but how you operate best. Are you a sledgehammer? Are you a finishing nail kind of hammer? Are you a framing hammer? Are you a jackhammer? All these different kinds of hammers. But the more that you understand you and align yourself, and I think there's some surrender involved with that. Like, I would like to be all sorts of things. My ambition would be to play football professionally, or like American football, or, I'd like to be a rock star, or whatever the case is. But when you just kind of surrender to the way that you've been created, I think that's when amazing things happen. And then you get to live out of that overflow of who you've been created to be.
Yeah, beautiful. I often say, out loud to anybody that will listen, is that if you get to know yourself so
Mhm.
well, nothing can stand in your way.
Yeah, agreed.
And that is exactly the same mentality that you just mentioned there. And to surrender into that, that's the difficult part, right? Like to surrender into that, because we are told by so many people what to do, how to do it. This
Hmm.
is the right way, this is the wrong way. And so I know myself, even like over the last 3 years, I've gotten super confused with who I was at my core.
Sure.
And it took me all last year to just surrender back
Mm.
into my own knowing about myself, and to support others to do the same thing as well. And yeah, once you do get to know yourself and to know what type of tool you are, what type of hammer you are, like really get chunked down, it does make things flow a lot easier, because when you're trying to just be the jackhammer when you're actually like the finishing hammer, it's
Mhm.
yeah, there's a whole lot of frustration and suffering that we put ourselves in. What's an example of this in your life? Where have you tried to be the jackhammer and you're actually the finishing hammer?
Oh, let me count the ways. I mean, just like you, it's just been a journey of discovery. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I think there's a resistance to like just really knowing who you are because sometimes I don't know about you or anybody else, but sometimes I'm fearful to know my limitations as a
Yeah.
person. And so that can be a little bit intimidating, but I think the vulnerability can be so healing and
Mm,
and and so peace giving where we kind of go, okay, wait a minute, like I can't be all things to all people. I just have to be
mm,
me. And that
mm,
surrender can be so good. I think yeah, I so a lot of people don't know this about me, but I used to be a pastor for 28 years.
mm.
And so I led local congregations, led on a regional level, I led on a national level. And there was a part of me that always felt awkward
Yeah.
in that.
Okay.
And so I think I did it, I think I did it well awkwardly, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. But
Hmm.
as a mental performance coach, I mean, I just had some amazing meetings with people, and whether they were divine appointments or whether, it was just the universe smiling on me. I just met the right people at the right time, and
Yeah.
I ended up doing what I'm doing now. But I think it's interesting, even in the ministry, I've been on 1,000 platforms, and yet at this, I mean, I'm always nervous, first of all, but I always felt awkward, and so
Mm.
I would revert back to what I knew best, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that coaching was a thing
Yeah.
even when I was doing it, and so I instead of telling my congregation what to think, I or even how to think, I would just kind of coach them. And so I'd
Interesting.
always leave things open-ended and never felt like telling because I don't think telling actually accelerates people's learning. And
Never.
there was a
Mm.
great Harvard paper written on this a few months ago. And the idea that, when people get to self-discover their truths, that they actually learn twice as fast as opposed to us telling them
Yeah.
what they should think or what they should do. And so I thought to myself, wow, like going slow is actually the fast route. So I
Mm.
have lots of examples of
Mm.
me sort of stumbling,
Mm.
forward and trying to figure myself out. And you just have to try lots of things and fail. And
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
we reinvent ourselves and we have, like for me, a midlife crisis where I'm like, okay, I can go buy a new car or
Yeah.
I can sort
Yeah.
of figure out what I want to do with my life. And I chose the latter just to spend probably about a 4 month period just really thinking through what I wanted with my life. And I ended up doing, having all these pieces of paper all over my office and trying to figure out my life. It was like drawing circles and arrows and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And uh, and then I ended up putting together something unbeknownst to me, something called the game plan for life. And
Yeah.
so it's helping people discover their identity, their
Mm-hmm.
purpose, their calling, the vision they have for their life, their unique strategy to get there, their personal philosophy, their current assignments. And
Mm-hmm.
if you put all of that together, you kind of have whole life excellence and
Yeah.
you have sort of a game plan to execute. And I think, if you just put in you call it timeout and you put in the work in 2 days, you can figure everything out about your life. And so why spend the rest of your life, like years or decades, trying to figure out who you are and what you should do when you can probably do it in about 2 days? And
Mm-hmm.
then you could spend all of your life pursuing that because you now know exactly what your purpose and calling and all those things are. So Yeah, sometimes it's just stumbling and trying to figure things out and going through crises and of identity and trying to figure out who we are. And there's not many shortcuts.
No, I love that you said that because I have a program called the Finishers Club, and I help
I
people,
saw that.
yeah, finish their first intentional goal.
That
And
is
everyone's like, look, everyone's finishing goals all the time. I'm like, yeah, but did you know how to get there? And could you recreate it? And the philosophy inside the Finishers Club is you set goals, you pursue them, you fail at them because they do. Like pretty much every person that comes through, they never do their first. It's only a 4-week goal.
Yep.
Nobody does their 4-week goal like in 4 weeks ever. In their first go, they keep showing up and keep doing it, and then all of a sudden, I've got my current cohort going through at the moment, and people have finished in 3 weeks
Oh,
already.
I love that.
And so, but they're just like figuring out who they are, their identity, what's working for them, what's not, what do they have to drop and leave behind, the identity that they're stepping into. I call it the self-concept. And just like figuring out what works for them. And there is no cookie cutter process. I give tools and strategies to like try this out. But if you give it a good go and you try it out and you don't like it, doesn't feel right, like feels icky every time that you try to do that, just don't do it. Find something else,
So good.
But so
Yeah.
many people are like hard on themselves, like I should do this, I should do it this way, Gary said this, Prue said that. It's like, no, like this is about learning about who you are and what works for you. And the only way that you know how to do that is when you fail at it. And I've got an example of this. I was thinking this is just a life example. So I have a 17-year-old son, and he has recently got his license. So he got his license for 6 months. And, as parents, as you know, you've got 3 kids yourself, you tell them what to do.
Oh, yeah.
This is the example of like telling people it never works.
Yeah.
You're like, make sure you drive safely. Make sure you don't do this. Don't do that. Don't speed. Don't do that. And then I get a call from my son a couple of weeks ago saying, Mum, I've just been pulled over by the police.
Oh,
I'm like,
no.
oh, yeah. Yes, I was speeding. I'm like, well, and I had this conversation with him. It's like, Mum and Dad tell you what to do. We've gone through it already. We've learnt the lesson. And I walked away from that conversation and he's like, yeah, I didn't really realize the consequence until it's happened to me. So you have to fail all the time to learn. And I can tell you, he's going to like pull back on the throttle now.
My son got in a car accident and he hasn't been in one since. It was just the first year of having his license and he assumed, and now he's learned to never assume, when he's going to do something. So isn't it interesting? When we're younger, or when our kids are younger, we're caregivers. And then in their teen years, we're coaches.
Yeah.
And as they get older, late teen 20, we become consultants. So we go from caregiver to coach to consultant.
Yeah.
And the consultant phase is pretty fun, The coaching stage, there's a little bit of tension there.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay. It's like there's a cloth and it's being ripped, right? They're figuring out their independence and the independence from us. And sometimes there's some tearing and it can be a little bit painful, but it's a healthy thing. Yeah. And we want to applaud that. So, yeah.
Exactly. Actually, being the consultant, yes, I can see that happening, but I'm also the executive assistant for my my adult child. She's like, Mum, can you just do this for me? Like I'm like her admin assistant.
Yeah. Well, you said earlier about like I have something called 4x4s. So I have my clients do 4 goals every 4 months.
Yeah.
So those are the boulders, right? There's lots of pebbles that you could move, but let's move the boulders. So what are the 4 big boulders we can move in the next 4 months? But one of the things, one of my new phrases that I've been really just sort of contemplating and thinking about was inspired action. So there's action, but there's inspired action. And the action's great. Like you want to take action on your goals, but every now and again, you take some inspired action. And man, the inspired action can bear so much fruit. It can be so profitable when we take that inspired action. So I think I've been asking people, what's the inspired action that you can take? And it's always fun to hear people's responses when they take inspired action.
Yeah. So how does one know that they're taking inspired action? What is it that defines inspired action from just action?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me. So think of archery and you have a bullseye, and the further away you are from the bullseye, you have to take gravity into account.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you might have to aim a little higher than what your target is. I find that when it comes to people, they tend to under aim
Mm.
for what is possible. And
Mhm.
if they just aimed a little higher, that they could probably hit their target right on and then some. And
Yeah.
so I think challenging people, I think, is really important. Like, for example, I had one client who was just successful at everything. He just seemed to like succeed at everything he did. He was a professional, European soccer player, football player,
Mhm.
and he was on a TV show. He had his own TV show for four
Yeah.
years. He was a celebrity. It just everything the guy touched just seemed to be successful. And he had a successful remodeling company,
Yeah.
and so he was like, I don't know what to do next with my life. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, you've done all these amazing things. And so he was quite frustrated. He was going through a game plan for life with me. He had flown me down to Phoenix, Arizona, and so I said, well, maybe you're just aiming too low. Like
Mm.
it's not challenging enough.
Mhm.
And so we talked and we talked, and he goes to Guatemala once, or once or twice a year to help build houses. And I was like, "Are you bored of building houses?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, maybe a little bit. I try different things and try and build two houses instead of one." I said, "You know what you should do? You should build a city."
Mm.
And you should have seen his eyes pop, like just wide open. And I was like, yeah, that guy is talented enough to bring together an entire country. Like he's talented enough to bring everyone together and build a city with
Yeah.
everything that he would dream would be necessary to have a successful city. And so he's on his way, right? Like he's on his way to doing just crazy stuff.
Oh,
So I think the
yeah.
inspired action, I think, has to be challenging enough
Yeah.
that you just say, oh, okay, I'm going to have to just like, wow, maybe I just need to dream a little bit bigger. Can I
Mhm.
do it? And some people are
Mhm.
wired to achieve that. Other people might not be, so risky or take
Yeah.
that kind of a leap, but there are a lot of people who just underestimate how powerful they are.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We were talking earlier, you said you're a visionary. What does that mean to you?
Hmm. Well, so it's easy to get punch drunk on vision, and
Mm.
then that's all that you see.
Mhm.
But for me, when I was younger, I had a mentor of mine, and at that time I was looking just a prairie boy in Canada. And he said to me, here's what I see for your life, Gary. And at this time, I'm like 21 years old or 22. And I didn't, you're 21, you don't know anything about the
Mhm.
world, right? And so he said, I see you in this little pot, and maybe that's your home in Canada, but what's going to happen is you're going to be transplanted, so the roots are going to be ripped out, and you're going to be transplanted into a larger pot,
Mhm.
and then after a while that is going to be loosened and painful, but you're going to be transplanted into a larger pot, and then after that you're going to be transplanted into a garden.
Mm.
But that's not the end. He said
Mhm.
there's going to come a time in your life that you're transplanted into a field, and there's a lot of things that are going to have to die, like seeds. There's a lot of things that are going to have to die before you have the global impact that you want.
Mhm.
And so I've always remembered that sort of that encouraging word in my life. And so now it struck a chord with me back then, but I didn't know really anything that he was talking about. I just
Yeah.
remember the illustration. And so as my life has gone on, I just remember going from this little town in Canada to Seattle, which was a bigger pot, and then being involved locally in leadership at all sorts of different levels, and then regionally, and then nationally, and then in Canada and the United States internationally. And then I traveled around the world last year. So it's like, oh, okay. So I'm looking for opportunities to
Yeah.
expand globally because I've just sort of connected the dots in the constellation that is my life. And so now I'm sort of just trusting and hoping that whatever I'm doing is on a global scale and having a generational impact. And
Mm.
of course, I can't control any outcomes, but I can always put myself in the position to succeed. That's one of the things that I tell my athletes is that you can do the perfect thing in sport and it be the exact opposite. Like you can throw the perfect pitch
Mm.
in baseball, but it get
Mhm.
hit for a home run. You can make the perfect
Yeah.
pass or perfect kick and they get stopped. Like you just don't know. But all
Yeah.
you can do is put yourself in the best position to succeed. And so any opportunity that comes that's on a global scale, I'm pretty excited about, and my radar is up for them. So when it comes
Yeah.
to vision for me, I kind of think a lot bigger than what I'm probably capable of doing, and that I will need help doing it. But my
Hmm.
radar is definitely up. Did a podcast from a gentleman in the Caribbean, and he said that I really want to put you in touch with our prime minister, our president, and because we think that the game plan for life would be very, very useful in multiple institutions in our country. And I have a leadership background of 30 years plus, 33 years. So I'm just looking for opportunities to express what I think is already there. Do I feel capable? Not really. Do I feel like I'm talented? Definitely not. But I
Yeah.
think there's enough experiences and enough failure to say, okay, I've learned a couple things, and now I
Yeah.
want to really maximize my talent, and whatever it is, whatever little talent I have, I just want to maximize and have my highest and best use in the world.
Yeah. So did you read, thank you, that was an awesome explanation of your vision and what you think that means to you. Did you ever read the book by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Be Useful book?
I haven't.
Uh,
No.
you should read that.
Is
I
it?
felt
Is it
when I was
good?
reading your information, I was like, be useful. Those are the words that kept ringing in my head from Arnold.
I would probably enjoy that.
Yeah, you would. It's really practical, common sense type of stuff, and I really liked it. So tell me, what was the best thing that you did last year that took you international?
Well, it's actually a fascinating story. So I'm in a neurodiverse marriage,
Yeah.
and my wife has autism, and we've never, after 30, I mean, I've been married 33 years, but 32 years, we had never, ever, ever sort of spoken publicly about the neurodiversity in our marriage.
Okay.
And so for the very first time, we announced on a podcast, a relationship podcast, and we just shared our story about
Yeah.
neurodiversity in our marriage and how different that's been and how challenging that's been. Well, that was like a coming out of the closet party for us. Like
Wow.
that was a really big deal. It was an
Yeah.
emotional thing, and it was a big deal. So the first time in 33 years, 32 years. Well, the next day I get an email from somebody in Madrid
Yeah.
saying, we have a coaching group, and we focus on neurodiversity in the workplace. And so would you come to Madrid and speak on neurodiversity and
Wow.
coaching and mental performance and leadership, and like literally the next day.
That's crazy.
And so that's kind of that took me to Madrid, and
Hmm.
of course, I got lots of invitations to go back, which how can you resist,
Yeah.
not going to Madrid, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll go back and do more work in neurodiversity, but yeah, that's probably the most fun thing
Mm.
that I've done in the last year, and it was a pretty cool experience,
Yeah.
especially the next day,
Yeah.
after we had come out publicly. That was a kind of a divine moment for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting how you like sitting on that information for yourself, not realizing that the what you've experienced in life could help others.
Hmm.
Didn't realize that that was nice.
Well, vulnerability.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's healing without vulnerability.
No, there's not, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that vulnerability opens you up, and it opens
Yeah.
others up, and it opens the world up. And so I think part of it was just being vulnerable with
Hmm.
the struggles and challenges that we've had in our marriage. Like it's, I don't know the exact figures, but it's like 77% of all neurodiverse marriages end in divorce.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time it's the male that has autism or is on the
Okay.
autism spectrum.
Yeah.
And 10% well, in my case, my wife she's in that minority, and I'm in my minority, and so it's provided different challenges, but we're, I'd like to say all 33 years we're happy and bliss, but it's been, pretty challenging. But
Yeah.
we made it this far, and I think we're really excited about our future, and seeing what's in store for the next, I kind of feel like I can run hard till I'm 70 and I'm
Yeah.
55 now. So I want to make the last 15 years the very best. And I really, truly think the best is yet to come.
Yeah, me too. I have that thought and belief that, yeah, the best is yet to come. And yeah, even without neurodivergent, people inside your marriage, it's difficult as well. But on saying that, I know, like, I want to say there's a high number of people that I talk to these days that have been diagnosed, like late, diagnosis of ADHD or autism. And so it's a huge factor in people's lives these days. So having people like yourself come out and talk about it, how in particular in your marriage, is really important to people because it's very isolating. I feel people feel very isolated and there's not a lot of information out there. So it's starting to come
Yeah,
to the forefront more.
right. And, I think, you know, one of the focus points in neurodiverse marriages is how different you are. But if
Yeah.
we're going to be honest, most of us are very different than our spouse. And
Yeah.
so really what we're talking about is differences and the way that we
Right.
handle and perceive
Mm-hmm.
those differences. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow in the differences and to actually celebrate the differences. So
Yeah.
sometimes, where our focus goes, our energy flows. And so when our
Mm-hmm.
focus is on something negative happening in our marriage, that's where all of our energy flows. And so if we can change the focus and
Yeah.
appreciate, so many things in each other, and then I think, and then we can give our attention to those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that reminds me, last week I was talking to a client, or having a coaching session, and we had done her wheel of life at the very beginning of our coaching, and there was lots of things she worked on or would like to work on, and one of them was friendships.
Mm.
And she rated her friendships, like how she felt, like there's a whole, why she felt that way, but it was 2 out of 10. And it's like, where do you think you could get to in the next 12 months? She's like, I'd love to get to a 7, I think it was.
Mm.
Anyway, so we've been doing a lot of coaching, not specific about, relationships or friendships or anything. But as you know, the ripple effect happens when you coach with a coach, and it just ripples out to the rest of your life. And she was saying that she has realized that she was doing the 80-20 rule, but the wrong way around. So she was focusing on 80% of the things that she didn't like about herself in the relationship or her friend in the relationship. And instead, all she's done is change that around to focusing on the 80% that is great. And yeah, there's always going to be 20% that, you have to compromise with and all that sort of stuff. And that actually, just that one little shift has, propelled her to, I think she said, an 8 already, like so past
That's
what she thought was
outstanding.
possible. And so, yeah, it's all about how you think about things, what you focus on, like you said, what's the saying? Where focus goes, energy flows.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, significant relationships in our lives, whether it's marriage or, people are just involved in a very intimate relationship with one another, because I was in the position I was for 30 years, I did a lot of marriage counseling and a lot of marriage coaching. And I've also done a lot of premarital counseling.
Okay.
And
Oh, yeah,
so,
of course. Yeah.
tons,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I've sort of like identified marriage being three things.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could say anything to a couple, and I only had one shot, what would I say? And
Yeah.
so I figured, at least for me, I figured out what I would say. Number one, marriage is a castle. You have to protect it, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
significant relationship is a castle. And
Mm-hmm.
it is bombarded. Some are cannonballs, some are arrows, some are pebbles, some are rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have necessarily a good or bad value to them. Sometimes stress is an attack on the marriage. Sometimes it's the in-laws, sometimes it's money, sometimes it could be
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things. The idea is to protect
Yeah.
the castle.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst thing in the whole world we can do is lay down that drawbridge for the enemy to come and like, don't be dumb. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
But marriage already is challenging. So protect the castle is number one. Number two is marriage is a bank account
Mm-hmm.
and you have to make
Mm.
deposits. And sometimes
Yeah.
you have to make big deposits because the withdrawals are coming. But if you don't
Yeah.
have anything left in your account to cover a
Yeah.
withdrawal, then you're in trouble and you go bankrupt and you have a bankrupt relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to constantly be investing and putting and depositing things in your marriage
Mm.
for it to be strong and healthy. And then number three, I just tell people to grab some pom poms. be your
Yeah.
spouse's or your
Yeah.
significant other's biggest cheerleader. Because
Yeah.
Lord knows I've tried to be my spouse's counselor or my
No.
spouse's coach or I mean, you name it, I've tried it and I've
Yeah.
failed pretty much with everything. But
Yeah.
one thing I have found that hasn't failed is being a cheerleader. So if my
Yeah.
wife says, I'm thinking about basket weaving, taking a basket weaving class. I'm like, that would be awesome. You should
Yeah.
totally do it. And in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm thinking, you should not do that. Like, why would you? But I'm just so encouraging or try to be so encouraging.
Yeah.
And I just find that water finds its own level. Maybe she follows through, maybe she doesn't. But at the
Hmm.
very least, I just want to be a cheerleader. And I don't think you can go wrong being a cheerleader.
Oh, no, I love that. I think that is really important inside a marriage, the cheerleading.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What was I going to say there? The idea of that there's a perfect relationship just for you out in the world is absolute BS, and
Mhm.
it takes work and commitment, and that's the one thing that I would say to people is that commit all the way in, like just go all in on the relationship. I see so many relationships that everyone's half out, like, oh well, if this doesn't work out, I'll do this instead. It's like, no, you can't think like that. You have to be all in, committed, figuring out problem solving, cheerleading,
Yeah,
protecting the
it's true.
castle all the
Exactly.
time. You can't
A
be
lot of
half
the
out all the time.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
couples, when they're younger, their romance leads to commitment, and that might be
Mm.
marriage or moving in together or
Hmm.
establishing some type of formal agreement with one another. So your romance leads to commitment. But when you're married or you're involved in a long-term relationship, it's actually the other way around. It actually
Yeah.
has to shift. So your
Oh, yeah.
commitment to each other leads to romance. And
Yeah.
so I love, just reaffirming my commitment to my spouse and her to me. And it
Hmm.
leads to romance. It's not the other way around. It's got to make that shift
Mm.
at some point in your marriage.
Hmm. What's one thing you guys do in your marriage to keep the romance?
Well, so there's two things. Number one, as I used to go out on a date with my wife once a month, and I had
Hmm.
a mentor of mine saying, "What? Once a month? That's terrible. You need to do that more often." I was like, "Wait a minute." I thought, especially when your kids are young, you're like, I don't like. We literally, I don't know about where you live in Australia, but for us here, some of the grocery stores have like a place where you can drop your children off,
Oh,
and
really?
there's some
We do not
sweet.
have that.
Yeah. It's not everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just some places.
Yeah.
But so they had this little kid area and they would have
Mm-hmm.
this sweet little old grandma there. And so
Yeah.
we would drop our child off there. And
Yeah.
eventually our child just grew to love this lady, bless her heart. And
Mm-hmm.
my wife and I would, go to the, shop a little bit. We had a little cafeteria area, like a little
Mm-hmm.
coffee area. And that's where we had our dates. And
Yeah.
so we moved them to once a week, which was really powerful. And so now our kids are a little bit older, they're adults, but every Saturday morning, my wife and I drive 30 minutes outside of the city just to sort of like leave our lives, leave the pressure, leave
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
stress. And we have a date every Saturday morning. So
Okay.
that's
That's
been
fun.
one thing. And then the other thing we really enjoy doing is reading a book together and
Okay.
discussing it on every date. So we've
Yeah.
done a ton of books. Our latest one was Wired for Love by Steve Tatkin. And what a wonderful book. One of the
Mhm.
best I've ever read in
Really?
33 years on marriage.
Wow.
And so it's just had so many really great antidotes and just really great things that we could put into practice. It talks about the couple
Oh.
bubble, how you got to protect the bubble, and talks
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
launching and landing, what's the best way to, when you ask your spouse, what's the best way I could launch you every single day?
Yeah.
And what's the best way we could land our relationship every single day. And so
Yeah.
that's something that Molly and I take really we're taking very seriously, launching and landing. So the book is wonderful and we like to discuss those on our dates.
Yeah. Nice. Well, it's funny that you say once a month because that's what Joel and I do. My husband and I, we do once a month. It's
It's pretty good. That's
yeah.
good.
Up until like last year, we did once a month, and I think we got like 9 out of 12 done, like intentional. There was lots of little, coffee dates and all that sort of stuff along the way.
Sure. Sure.
But this year we've committed to it again. It's like once a
Good.
month,
Good
something
for you.
different that we normally wouldn't do, just a
Yeah.
little bit outside our zone of comfort. And it's great because, it gets Joel thinking about what things to do. And I'll be honest, he does most of the planning. It's supposed to be taking in turns. But he loves doing that. I don't particularly love doing that. So he's like,
Yeah.
oh, I found these 2 things in February because he says to me, have you got anything planned for February? I'm like, oh,
Oh,
no,
that's
I
funny.
haven't. He's like, oh, well, I've got
Yeah.
2 ideas. I was like, great, you just roll with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Isn't it
once a month is
hilarious?
good for us. Like in the time where we are right now, it's good. He works away 10 days a month, so we're
Mm,
sort of navigating that as well. And
yeah.
it's actually
Right.
really great because prior to that, we never did anything. So
Yeah.
it's like 100% improvement from
Yeah.
what we were doing earlier.
Absolutely. Good for
Yeah,
you guys. That's awesome.
yeah, it is really nice. And the marriage has ups and downs all the time. As you know, we've got to figure out how to navigate through each other's own unique personalities. And yeah, again, coming back to the original, get to know yourself so well that nothing stands in your way. If you do that, you have the foundations of who you are. So navigating somebody else's things as well, it's so much easier when you realize
Mhm.
that. And so, yeah, that's always nice.
Yeah. Well, asking for what you want is a muscle.
Yeah, it is.
And in early 20s, for a lot of people, it's just, it's sort of cool to be like, whatever, man, like whatever you want to do. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
flexible. I'm so, then
Hmm.
you realize that that gets you in trouble
Yeah.
because it doesn't work anymore in your mid to late 20s and early 30s. You're like, I guess I got to commit to something. I guess I got to decide something. Well, yeah, to
Yeah.
decide in Latin, to decide means to cut away. It's scission, right?
Ooh, okay.
Decision.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
cutting away your options
Yeah.
and you're making a decision. Choices and decisions are not the same thing. A
Mm,
choice is like you have multiple, things that you can choose from. But making a decision is cutting away multiple choices so that then you decide one thing. Because if you don't, think about going down a hallway and you have all these choices of
mm,
doors that you can go through. Well, after a while, being in the hallway for the rest of your life is, yeah, it's pretty frustrating. You have to walk through a
mm,
door. You have to decide that you're
yeah.
going to pick one and go through it. Could you be wrong? Of course you can, but you can always course correct. And
Yeah.
that's the best thing. Just keep moving forward and you can always course correct along the way.
Yeah. I like that. I always say that. You can always take a U-turn
Yeah.
anytime. It's like, I think I heard Mel Robbins once say about, you could be driving out of town, you in your U-Haul going down the road to the next place and get halfway there and go, actually, this is not right, and turn around and go
Yeah.
back. There's like, who cares? Just
Get
turn
off
around.
at the next exit.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
like totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so you're a sports guy, which, is the complete opposite to me. I'm not a sportswoman at all. My husband loves sports. Um, what's the one thing that, you work with elite athletes and people, in positions like that? What is the one thing that you see that keeps coming up and you're always like, oh, what about this? Like giving that perspective, I suppose, that helps them be this like the successful person and sports person that we can take, like us everyday people, non-sports people, can take in our lives that can improve our lives. What is that one thing?
Yeah, there is a common theme
Yeah.
amongst a lot of athletes, and it does pour over into other areas of life, whether you're an
Hmm.
athlete or not, and that is hesitation.
Oh,
And so a lot of players will overthink, and then they'll say the way that they'll communicate it is that they're saying, "Man, I just have too many thoughts. I overthink things." Well, the
hmm.
result of overthinking is that you hesitate.
Yeah.
And when you hesitate, how important is that in sports? Well, it's the difference between winning and losing in sports.
Yeah.
But it's also like that in life a lot, is
Hmm.
when we hesitate. Hesitation is an indication we're not confident about something.
Yeah.
And so how hard is it to accomplish something when you're not confident of something? It's very difficult. It's already hard to do,
Yeah.
but to do it with so little confidence, listen, whatever it is that you're doing is hard and it requires that you have confidence. And so I'll take a confident athlete any day of the week over an unconfident athlete. So when it comes to, let's say, business or leading your family or being an example to other people or whatever job that you have, if you're perpetually hesitant, you're actually losing out on all sorts of opportunities. I have a
Mm,
saying that says that success loves speed.
mm,
And it does. Like, so you think to yourself, well, I don't want to make the wrong decision. Well, think of
mhm.
like let's say an Air Force, like a Navy jet fighter.
Yeah.
And if two jets and two countries are fighting against each other and they're in these jets, And one of them is just like fire away, like first thing, like let's go, like not hesitating. And the other person is like, well, I got to sort of figure this out a little bit, you know. Well, by the time they figured out, they're dead, right?
Yeah.
Their plane has been hit. And so, yeah, you can always course correct along the way, but it is important to be more decisive.
Hmm.
And yeah, you're going to get, you might be more wrong than you might be right. However, you're going to be moving forward and learning so much in the meantime, it's actually worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. As soon as you said hesitate, I always, when I'm in traffic, I always have this thing, those who hesitate are lost. And so
Yeah.
you got to
It,
make fast decisions in traffic, right?
yeah. Oh, it's so true. And I
Yeah.
guess the way I like to explain is that
Yeah.
thoughts are like calories. If
Yeah.
you think too much, if you have too many calories that you don't expend in a
Yeah.
day, you get slow and lethargic and you don't move very well. You don't feel great. And so it slows you down.
Mm.
So if our job is to limit our thoughts so that we can perform at a high level no matter what we're doing. So if you like, for example, I had a chance to speak to the FBI in this past spring,
Mm.
and it was how to perform under pressure. But the FBI has protocols for everything, right? Like
Yeah.
they'll have
Yeah.
acronyms and protocols. Well,
Yeah.
why is that? Well, so they don't overthink things, but
Yeah.
they stick to what they're supposed to be doing. So I developed a protocol for high pressure situations that works with FBI, police, athletes, and people in business. And anybody could use this for almost any situation.
Yeah.
So this is what I do. It's called CAPE,
Okay.
CAPE.
Uh-huh.
C stands for control yourself,
Yeah.
right? So you have to be under control. Can't be out of control. So take that deep breath, take that sigh, take that moment, whatever you need just to relax a little bit, you do that. Okay. So C stands for control yourself. A stands for assess the situation. Your brain is a remarkably wonderful computer.
Mm.
It processes things so fast. It's unbelievable. If I took you to a place you never were before, and I said, you know, I had you close your eyes and then open your eyes and you look at the room just for 1 second, you could tell me 100 things about that room
Yeah.
without even like knowing it. Your brain, it works so subconsciously. It's remarkable. So assess the situation as best as you can in the allotted time. Then P stands for plan, make a plan. Okay. And then E stands for execute, which is trust your plan, trust your training, and trust your instincts.
Mm.
So what we're doing is we're not allowing that other person to be distracted by what I call the confidence spiral. You know,
Yeah.
like you're just thinking, well, I might get distracted by maybe there's someone in the stands that's, you know, really handsome or really pretty, or you smell a hot dog, or you smell some food, or you're thinking about, you know, what went on 20 minutes ago, or what's happening after the game, or
Mhm.
after an event, or after a conversation. So your mind is constantly in another zip code or
Yeah.
another time zone. We just need you right here, right now. And so if I can give you a protocol, you're not thinking about how things aren't going well. You're not thinking about, but
Mm.
you are just following through on this acronym CAPE so that you can be in the best position to succeed at whatever it is that you're doing. So a police officer walking up to a car, he's caping, right?
Yeah.
He's controlling himself. He's assessing the situation. Could be dangerous. He's
Yeah.
making a plan. He knows how he's going to approach the car and what's
Hmm.
going to happen, or she. And then he is like, okay, I'm going to trust my training and trust my instincts and trust my plan. So
Yeah.
it is just a helpful acronym to be at your very best.
Absolutely. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Um, the I just lost my train of thought then. But yeah, the whole going back to the driving, it's the same thing. We're caping all the time as well when we're driving, you
Mhm,
know. And the
mhm,
thing with the driving, there's a real difference between someone that's a confident driver and somebody that is not confident. And you can see it on the
hesitating.
road. They're hesitating. They're the ones that cause the accidents because they're, you
Yeah.
know, slamming the brakes on and not changing lanes and they've got their blinker on and all that sort of stuff. So being confident, you know, and having that belief in yourself with the, you know, the identity that I'm a great driver. You know, you
Mhm.
go out on the road with that confidence and you get to A and B without any accidents. Like
Yeah.
it's super. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so
It's like
much.
you're watching other people and you're like, what's your plan? Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing? Like, what's your plan? I don't know
yeah.
what your plan is. You apparently don't know what your plan is.
No, that's right, exactly. And you know, even though I'm not a sports person, I do use sports analogies in my coaching all the time because it's the best way to put
Yeah.
analogy together when you're using like goalposts and making a goal and all that type of stuff. And I always think that you have to set the goal in advance, and you can't move the goalposts halfway through. I think people do this way too often. They're not getting the results that they want as fast as they want. So therefore they go, oh, maybe I'll just move the goalposts. I'll make them smaller, or I'll make them, not as many people, or, impact or whatever. Or, even if it's losing weight, I'll just like pull it right back and make it easy. But your brain does not like that. Your brain likes clear direction. It likes to know the path. And as we're talking about failing before, it also learns from failure. So if you allow yourself to fail instead of moving the goalposts around, you get to the point where you're like, that worked, or that didn't work. And then therefore you can ask yourself the question, well, what can I do differently next time? And so, so using sports analogies in coaching is the best, because, hey,
it really is. Like, it's funny too, because from time to time, I'm known to say really, really rude things. And I don't mean to be rude. It's just like, for example, like one of the things I might say that is like, they'll be like, well, I tried that. I'm like, but how hard did you try? Like, I'm curious, like, how much effort did you give? You made a goal. It was, at the time, it was a great goal. You still think it's a great goal. You say you tried, but I wonder how much effort you really gave. And so sometimes I'll tell athletes, I'll be like, try harder.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like such a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
It's like, no. If you want to be successful at something. So I teach something called the illusion of choice. So the illusion of choice is, if you want to be average at something, you have all types of choices in your life. Like, think of a menu at a restaurant. If you want to be the average eater, you can pick anything you want on the menu. If you want to be a good eater, you've got less choices on the menu. Well, what happens if you want to be an elite eater, or the best eater, or a great eater? You kind of have no choice. You're going to eat healthy. Yeah. So when it comes to people that perhaps sometimes they say they try, well, I'm just like, well, you're sort of, you want the best result, but you want to put in the least amount of effort. And so that illusion of choice is, listen, if you want to be good at what you do, it just requires more commitment from you. But and that's fine if you want, nothing wrong with average. But at least in the world that I live in, if you want to be really outstanding at something, you got to have what I call, your kind of crazy. Like, what's your kind of crazy? Like, you'll go to some length to accomplish something because that's your kind of crazy. It's not other people's kind of crazy, but it needs to be yours if you want the intended result that you want. And so you're going to have to match the result with your effort. And if it's not commensurate, then maybe you should change your goal or try harder. That's kind of what you've done. Because oftentimes people don't realize what it takes to be successful. And so they'll be like, I'll be like, well, how hard did you try? Well, I did it for 30 minutes or 20 minutes just the one time, or 5 times a week. Like, what did you? Well, it was the one time for 20 minutes I tried. I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, most things in life require more effort than that. So is it maybe can seem insensitive? Maybe, but it just is a reality check for them that, listen, the goal that you have set for yourself is not an easy one. But you set it and you want it. Maybe it just requires more of you than what you're willing to give right now. And if life circumstances prevent you from doing, that's okay. We all go through stuff, and we can't do all the things that we want to do sometimes. So you can give yourself some grace. However, sometimes if you feel like you have the bandwidth to try harder, you definitely should, because it's almost like having 4 or 5 wells in the, like, drills in the ground trying to get oil. And they each go down a foot, but it's not working. So you dabbled in this, you dabbled in that, you put this key in this lock and it didn't work. You put this key in this lock and it didn't work. But what if you were to take up all the drills, attach them together, and now you can go 5 times as deep, and that's where the resources are. So sometimes you just have to drill down deeper to get the resources and the result or the treasure that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I say, those who succeed, the only thing that's different to people that do is that they don't give up. They
Hmm.
just keep going, just keep failing forward.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting dance. Like one of my favorite
Yeah.
books in the entire world is by Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings.
Okay.
And it's how quitting gets a bad rap.
Mm,
Quitting actually is a really good thing. It's
yeah.
very circumstantial, right? Like for
Mm,
example, um, let's say you're taking some substance you shouldn't be taking. It's not drawing the best out of you. You should quit that.
mm,
Even if it makes you feel good, you should quit it.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's a relationship we need to quit. Maybe there's a job that we need to
Yeah.
quit. Like it's not a reflection of your identity and that you're a failure. It's actually a recognition that something's not working and that you want to maximize your time and effort. And so you try something else. Nothing wrong with kidding. You're not a failure. Actually, most people that are really successful quit things all the time and they
Yeah.
quit them quickly, even at the expense of their own ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sort of lose their self-protection and they want to search for their highest and best use. So you know what? My daughter's in her late teens, early 20s now, and I told her try lots of stuff,
Yeah.
and she would have a job for 3 or 4 months and then she would quit and she would have another job for three. And I was like, okay, it's got to stop. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit too much. However, on the other hand, she had 7 interviews at like the age of 20 or 21 and she's had these jobs and from real estate to working as a server to all these different jobs. I'm just like, good for her, good
Mm-hmm.
for her. She's in
Mm-hmm.
her 20s and she's discovering all types of things about herself
Yeah.
as opposed to just not doing much. So good on her. I think in your 20s it's definitely the time to experiment, but
Yeah.
for us sometimes quitting can be the smartest thing in the world. It's just
Yeah.
we have all sorts of emotional baggage attached to quitting, and I think we should lose that.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, I just quit something a couple of weeks ago that I was, contemplating, it's back and forth. And the
Yeah.
thing that made me quit was uh, I looked at my energy levels and it's like, okay, where do I have the energy and and what's my goals? And I know my goals really clearly. It's like, does that, like putting out energy to that, is that going to get me there? And so it was no. And it's like, okay, so that's it. And so I quit that thing and it's like, okay, now can't use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Because
Good
we
for
often do
you.
that, right?
Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. And it's also a story about my own child. I've got a 14-year-old daughter and she started a job. She's never worked before in her life. She started a job just in a friend's office doing data entry, that type of stuff. And so she didn't know what she didn't know. So she said, yeah, I'll give it a go. She got there. She didn't like it. She's like,
Mhm.
I can't concentrate. I don't think this is for me. And so as a parent, you sort of make them push on a little bit, to get
Yeah.
over that, the
Yeah.
first couple of weeks. She only
Yeah.
lasted 4 weeks. She got to the fourth week and she's like, Mum, I really don't think this is what I need to do. And I actually gave her the story about quitting, when to know when to quit, and really stepping into, she's the only one that knows herself so well. So she's got to make it a call for herself, and it's not for me, it's not for the boss, it's for her, and she's got to start distinguishing that. And I think as a 14-year-old, she's learning these lessons already and knowing when to quit, for herself, and yeah, going on. So even though as parents it's like a hard road, you don't really know which way is the right way, but you've got to trust that the person that's doing the deciding knows what's right for them. And that's what I just lean on to. And also for myself, like leaning on what I know for myself. Back to the decision that I quit on, I am not one to do a pros and cons list because I'm a real, I know it in my bones type of person. It's got this
Mhm.
innate, like, yeah, that's for me, that's not for me.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I did a pros and cons list, which is like the first time I think I've ever really done one
Mhm.
thoroughly. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. It felt, because the pros list was 5, like some really great, pros on there, but there was like 25 on the cons. And
Interesting.
I was like, okay, so it satisfied my logical brain
Yeah.
to my emotional body, because
Sure.
a lot of the times when you're in a person that feels things like deeply and like it's a whole body no, inside, and you can't really explain it. So it's great when the pros and cons list lines up to that. So yeah.
Mhm. A lot of people think their feelings,
Oh, yes, they do. Yeah.
and I'm kind of like that a little bit.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
definitely I'm thinking when I'm feeling and I'm thinking my feelings. I'm thinking, oh, okay, like how do I feel about this and whatever. But one of the tweaks that I've made to the pros cons list when I'm working with clients that have to make a decision about something
Yeah.
is I do what's called a weighted pros and cons list.
Hmm.
I didn't read it in a book. I just made it up myself. But I thought,
Yeah.
well, not all these hold the same weight.
Yeah.
I could
No,
have
they don't.
5 things on one side and 10 things
Yeah.
on the other side, but the 5 might actually be heavier than the
Yes.
10. And
Yes.
so if I could attach a value between 1 and 10 to each one of those, or 1 on 100, then that feels like a more accurate, indication of how I'm feeling about things.
I love that. I actually heard someone else talk about this pros and cons lists, and even if you've got one on the cons and like 10 on the pros, and you still decide to make and leave that, make that decision to go, it's like, yeah, because of the weight of that one con. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It
so
depends.
true.
Yeah, it
It
depends
really
what it
does.
is. Like
Yeah.
in the game plan for life, I have 23 exercises, and one of them we sort of do, it's called vocational gating.
Hmm.
But we're trying to discover, based on this person's identity, what is their best next step in their life. And so, we'll say, well, what are your options? And they'll say, well, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. Um, and it's a really helpful exercise. But the next exercise sort of vets or proves, if you narrow it, your 5 things down to 2 things, well,
Hmm.
which of the two is the best choice for me now?
Hmm.
And, that's another exercise where you just use that discernment and say, okay, well, you know, some things, like for example, some things are really hard to negotiate and reason through. Like um, for example, are you a fast-paced person or a slow-paced person? Well, just this question alone is very weighty because if
Hmm.
you're a slow-paced person in a fast-paced environment,
Hmm.
you're not going very far.
Hmm.
You're gonna frustrate the people that you work with, and they're gonna be
Yeah.
frustrated with you, and vice versa. So some of the things do hold a little bit more weight than the others,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, it's important, I think, to put some sort of a weighted qualifier on the things that we're trying to decide.
Absolutely. Wow. We could keep talking forever.
I bet we could have a 4-hour
I'm
conversation. How
sure we
much
could.
fun. We'll just have to do it again, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would love to do that. But ending the podcast, what do you want people to know that will help them get to know themselves at the level that will help them, be useful just in their own lives and be there, have their best life? What is that thing?
Yeah, well, there's multiple things. It's sort of a suite of exercises and skills that one can develop to learn
Hmm.
those things, but they all revolve around self-awareness.
Mm.
And self-awareness, according to modern psychologists, is the number one indicator of success for people is self-awareness. So
Right.
if you're in a crowd and you're not self-aware and you're coming across a certain way and you're not very likable or whatever the case is, then there's going to be a disconnect relationally, emotionally, psychologically. And so my suggestion is to take every personality survey that you can possibly get your hands on.
Yeah.
Take them all so that you
Love
can
that.
discover who you are and how you're wired.
Yeah.
And
Tick.
I think like that.
Tick. Done all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just just take
Yeah.
everything you possibly can.
Yeah.
And whether you're, my age at 55 or whether you're 23 or you're 14, just take a season of your life where
Hmm.
you just type in assessment or survey or personality test. Take them all so that you
Yeah.
can increase your self-awareness. And that way you're going to know which environments that you belong in and which
Yeah.
environments work best for you. And it's don't be driven by your passion and don't be driven by your ambition. They're
Hmm.
unstable. But if you're driven by your personality,
Mm.
listen, what comes naturally to you is where the areas that you're probably the most confident in.
Mm-hmm.
And that confidence is necessary to be successful. And so just take the time to get to know yourself so that you can become aware of who you are and what kind of environment someone like you with your
Hmm.
personality traits would be successful in. And then things will flow much easier for you.
I love that. So all the 22-year-olds listening, do this now, because I'm sure Gary and I have, learnt the long way around
Oh
to
yeah.
get to
Oh
here. And
yeah.
I'm in my 40s and you're in your 50s. So
Yeah.
yeah, hear it from us.
And you don't
Do
stop
that.
learning. Like, for
No.
example, like one of the things that you can do actually, now that you mention it, I
Yeah.
wasn't planning on saying this, but in December, it's been a 2 to 3 year project for me,
Yeah.
was how to come up with a mindset or a mental performance assessment. And
Yeah.
I knew what was out there. I'd studied it extensively.
Hmm.
And I tried to like find, the best mental performance and mindset assessment. And I couldn't find one that was satisfactory. So
Hmm.
I created my own.
Awesome.
And so if people go to Elite Mindset Assessment, so this is a gift to your audience,
Yeah.
elitemindset.assessment.com, and we can put it in the notes and I can email you about it. But
Yeah.
you can actually take a mental performance mindset assessment, a test
Yeah.
assessment.
Nice.
And if you put in the words Elite 50, you can get
Yeah.
50% off.
Cool.
And I think just as an introductory, I'm only offering it for $20 right now. Most of them range between probably 30 or 40 and $150.
Yeah.
I'm only charging $20 for it, and I'm giving 50% off that. So
Yeah. Cool.
if people are interested in is Elite, all capitals, and
Hmm.
and the word or the number 50, Elite 50,
Yeah.
they can take it there, and they can literally pinpoint the areas where I call them growth areas. What are your
Yeah.
three biggest growth areas? And there's 22 different categories, so it's very thorough. It'll give
Nice.
you exactly what you like. It'll give you exactly where you are in terms of your mindset, because mindset is everything. If you change
Yeah.
your mindset about something or your attitude about something, it's game changing. Your attitude or your mindset is like a thermostat in your house. It controls the temperature in every
Mm.
room.
Yeah.
And it's the
It
same
is.
thing with your mindset. It controls almost everything in your life. So if you get that thermostat right, if you get that mindset right, then you can do amazing things.
Yeah. Incredible.
It
So
takes about
yeah.
12 to 15 minutes. It's not very long.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, like you said, the mindset is the thermostat of your life. So you can increase it, you can decrease it, you keep idling where you are. But if you want to have an elite life, to have the best life that you can,
Mhm.
possibly imagine and strive for, yeah, you have to get to know yourself so
Yeah,
well. And that all
absolutely.
starts with mindset. So everybody that's listening, I would love for you to support Gary and jump on and do his assessment. I know I will be. And yeah, I really appreciate your time today. I know it's Sunday night there in Seattle, so working on the Sunday, that's no good.
Yeah, but it was so much fun. Thank you
Yeah,
very
good. Thank you. Okay, that's it. We'll wrap it up. Thank you very much.
much. Awesome. Well, bye for now.
Bye.